Hello, my name is Zachary Cush, and I'm about to feed my life to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But before we get to that, let's cast an erstwhile gaze at Rebirth's predecessor, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake is the first part of the three-part Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy project, of which Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is to be the second. What are they going to call the third one? Probably Final Fantasy VII Reunion, but such revelations lie within the uncertain future. What is certain in this exact moment here in the present is that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy project is an adaptation of my favorite work of fiction of all time, Final Fantasy VII. My thoughts and opinions on that game could provably fill several feature-length films, but suffice to say for the auspices of this video essay that I came into this adaptation with a big bucket's worth of feelings and expectations. And I do consider Final Fantasy VII Remake, both the game and the broader trilogy project, to be an adaptation, as the complexities of the video game medium are robust enough that simply crossing genres constitutes adaptational changes. Thus, judging Final Fantasy VII Remake, the trilogy, and the game as an adaptation binds it within the three-strike rule. And that three-strike rule applies to the entire series, not just each individual game. There are three things I want from any adaptation. Number 1, character fidelity. Number 2, thematic fidelity. And number 3, wise story changes. For all adaptations are, in essence, somebody else's interpretation of the source material, and their interpretation had better be good. And so an adaptation, what lays itself before me for my judgment, can incur a strike from me for one of the following three reasons. Number 1, character infidelity. Number 2, thematic infidelity. Or number 3, a catastrophic error. These first 2 points are self-explanatory, but as for the third, I would define a catastrophic error as any story event which worsens or cheapens the story as a whole. An error so abysmal that it infects the rest of the story and holistically worsens it. Should an adaptation incur 3 strikes, I will cease to engage with it. For example, the television show Game of Thrones is an adaptation of the never-to-be-completed A Song of Ice and Fire novel series. Like many of you, I have a tale on how I stopped watching Game of Thrones that I will save for elsewhere. But for now, I will say that Game of Thrones incurred 3 strikes. 2 in Season 5 for character infidelity and a catastrophic error, and 1 in Season 6 for thematic infidelity. I didn't even finish Season 6. I've never seen Seasons 7 or 8. Such is my own fidelity to the rules of my making. I can break up with any story, even a story I deeply loved. So, how did Final Fantasy VII Remake, that's the game, not the trilogy, do? Do I love it? Did it fill me with fanboy rage? I haven't decided yet. And so I'm recruiting you to help me. I have gathered and organized my sporadic thoughts, what have gestated on Final Fantasy VII Remake, the game, for 4 years, and I now present them to you to help me decide. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Should I love it? Well, let us begin our inquiries with a bunch of stuff I liked about Final Fantasy VII Remake presented in a numbered list. In fact, this video essay will contain 2 numbered lists. Perhaps you have already guessed the subject matter of that second list. I won't spoil that, but I will tell you that both lists have the same number of things on them. See if you can spot the hidden meaning behind this particular number as it pertains to reviewing this game, and then share your discoveries with me in the comments. Choo-choo! Did you hear that? The train just pulled into the station, and its next stop is... Well, now that all that's out of the way, how about we start off this hoedown with some positives. Number 1, they remade Final Fantasy VII. In 2015, I was in a dorm room with a bunch of people who would end up leaving my life forever when I heard the news and saw that first teaser trailer. It was pretty astounding. From the reverie of a child beset by speculation and wishful thinking, I was probably chief among the naysayers who said that none of this would actually happen. And yet there I was, 9 whole years ago, with a twinkle in my eye and a full head of hair, enjoying my penultimate year of undergrad and counting down the days until I was legally able to drink, enjoying my ever-rotating band of 10 friends, which would eventually diminish to 2, and I was what would turn out to be about halfway through a relationship I thought was going to last until my death. Back then, even with such a reveal trailer being provably real, it didn't quite seem believable all throughout the drought years of 2016, 17, and 18. During that period, my life just spun on from nonsense to nonsense, all the way until 2019 when there was a live procession at E3, and then we saw the game. and it was like a real game that I was eventually going to purchase and possess. And with the PlayStation 4 approaching the end of its lifespan, I was able to procure a professional variety at a reasonable price during a Black Friday sale of that year, forsaking even my promise to myself that I would never purchase anything on Black Friday, all for the sake of my beloved Final Fantasy VII. I have betrayed my principles for this game. I next occupied myself with Death Stranding throughout that winter, and even stomached the month-long initial release delay, which was a bad sign in and of itself, all things considered. I then waited in the Best Buy parking lot during the opening days of the COVID pandemic, and halfway through an entirely separate relationship that I again thought was going to last until my death. There, once I had procured my precious parcel, I played it religiously for the next few weeks. I completed the game and then immediately played it again. I purchased the PC version once it came out and played that in full, and then played it again on hard mode, and then played it again to record footage, which ended up being slapped with the Activate Windows icon in the lower left-hand corner. The ghost of Starfield killing my CPU haunting me even now. I thus deleted that footage and re-recorded a fourth playthrough of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, with the footage that is currently spicing your very eyeballs. And even now, having tattooed the remake upon the ever-expanding folds of my brain, a child's voice rings in the back of my consciousness, and it says,
"Hey man, hey, just calling in to let you know that they remade Final Fantasy VII. And it's pretty good, and I don't believe it."
Like, I'm even staring at my game in my Steam library right this very second, and there's still a part of me that's like,
I can't believe that they actually remade Final Fantasy VII, and I own 2 copies of it, and I've played it in full, like, 12 times over the course of 4 years.
this is a real game. Like, they made it, man, and it looks pretty good. And all things considered, it's not bad. Good job. Thank you. Thanks for making it. Number 2, Lookin Good. From the limited capacity of the two-dimensional graphics of all varieties of divisible by 8 to the early polygon jank to the late polygon jank to this. Hey man, video games are starting to look real good. Motion capture, lighting technology, texturing and modeling and rigging and animating, a confluence of technological complexities all gather to imbue the characters what have predominantly existed within our imaginations to give them real, tangible presence. I love how expressive they are. I love how much attention has been given to their eyes. I love that animation has progressed enough that their performances have subtlety. I love that the slick simplicity of their original design has been preserved, though certainly Tetsuya Nomura-fied. Look at all those belts. Look at all Barrett's pockets. He could fit a laptop in there. Some sort of a live-action adaptation of Final Fantasy VII is likely as impossible as it is improbable. But these models seem close enough. God, just look at them walk around. Everybody's looking so good. Look at Reno's pecs. Look at the small hair follicles on Rude and Seng's faces. They have to shave. Look at how Eris's eyes smile. Look at Red 13's fur. I want to pet him. Look at all these particles they put over everything. There's all these particles. The state of the original's graphics are pretty much a meme at this point, and Final Fantasy VII Remake's graphics strut forth on the fashion stage and present themselves with austere confidence. This decaying, dystopic metropolis even makes filth look good. It's such a joy to even walk around in. Speaking of, number 3. Walking around. This may seem really small, but I really like just walking around in Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's a famous story in game development that when they were pioneering 3D movement with Super Mario 64, they spent an absurd amount of time just ensuring that moving around in the 3D space felt good. Fast forward into what we here in the present day would call the present day, and I could spend all afternoon moseying around Final Fantasy VII Remake's various trash heap cities, industrial walkways, flashy red light zones, and the valves of a megacorporation's diseased heart. God, I just like to walk around in this game. The crunch sounds of Cloud's boots on pavement, the subtle way your sword bobs in rhythm with your hair, and like all these places you get to walk. There's such a care and artistry to these environments, from the design to the layout to the ambience to the sound effects. It's not difficult for one to imagine the hours and hours of thankless work it took to make these places, and so I like to walk around and appreciate them. I mean, even take Chapter 2, which is in and of itself mostly a walking around simulator, and I honestly think it's one of the strongest chapters in the game. Who doesn't love walking around in the stark consequences of one's actions? Indeed, for all the chagrin the unimaginative waylay upon the prospects of walking in a video game, when used tactfully and pointedly, it can be just as compelling as sword murder or fancy cutscenes. Purposeful gameplay is king. Not to mention, I've been dreaming of walking around as a high-fidelity Cloud model my whole life. I mean, look at him. God, I wish Japanese character artists had designed me. I mean, I'm telling you, man, these characters have been in my heart my whole life. And getting to see them, and getting to see them be themselves fully and interestingly, it means a lot to me. And speaking of the characters, number 4. The characters. Much of my personal naysaying surrounding the broader Final Fantasy VII expanded universe, with Advent Children in particular being the target of my ire, stems chiefly from the broader flanderization of that most precious of Final Fantasy VII casts, the one I keep close to my heart. For example, the reduction of Cloud's personality complexity into the mopey moperson Debbie Downer that he is in the aforementioned Advent Children, or his frankly gaudy appearance in Kingdom Hearts is heartbreaking. As in the original, despite enduring a lifelong beset with hardship, Cloud was mainly an optimistic, if rather insecure dork who hid behind the facade of being an aloof, above-it-all jerk. In fact, his character arc revolves around shedding this facade and embracing his true self. In fact, the main theme expressed in Final Fantasy VII throughout its entire cast is the heroism inherent to authenticity and honest self-expression. Each of the 9 characters cast in our Final Fantasy VII Buddy Brigade are, at the time of their story introduction, putting on some sort of front and operating under some kind of willful falsehood. Such falsehoods lead our characters to suffer varieties of disaster, until at last, after a confrontation with the very circumstances of their pasts which served as catalysts for the creation of their facades, our heroes face and embrace the cold hard truth, and become more true to themselves. And through such process, they forged for themselves the worthiness of saving the world. In real life, by contrast, there are no such obvious world threats, nor are what world threats present solely solvable through violence. And yet, embarking upon a journey towards authenticity within one's own life feels a lot like venturing into the core of the earth to kill a shape-shifting alien and her chosen black-caped avatar. Indeed, it is in the nature of fantasy stories to literalize the abstract, to, say, take the idea of putting on a front and pretending to be something you're not, and embodying that idea within a shape-shifting alien. Thus, Cloud departs to join Soldier explicitly because he believes that achieving such a status will make him more desirable. Thus, he is abstractly seeking to become something he's not, a process which is literalized by the Genova cells that are literally making him into something he's not. A major plot point in Final Fantasy VII is that Cloud finds himself at the mercy of alien wills manipulating and controlling him, compelling him towards actions unhelpful for himself and his friends. However, once Cloud has finally had his little self-confrontation and finds the heroic resolve to be more authentic to himself, these Genova cells lose their ability to influence him. Indeed, expressed in this very plot confluence is the notion that seeking something outside of ourselves with which to craft our identities is beyond folly, as Cloud had the resources to become a hero within himself all along, whether or not he became a soldier. And these aliens, what take soothing forms and make big promises like,
If you get into Soldier, then you'll be strong enough for that cute girl next door to want to date you.
They're all liars. Their promises are false. The paradises they promise don't exist. And in fact, it's through convincing you that you need them that they take hold of you and control your thoughts. Thus, by engaging in literal combat with Genova, we are figuratively engaging in combat with the false parts of ourselves. In healing the planet vis-a-vis Mako reactor purging, we are thus contending with the harmful industry which we have constructed atop our own natures. Multiply such nuances across a varied cast, and you have a one-way ticket to profound emotionality. Indeed, the root of my admiration in Final Fantasy VII is its decision to confidently and brazenly be about something. It's great stuff, but alas that such meaning does not make its way into a good movie poster. I find Advent Children is bereft of all such things. The characters are not themselves. They are but the walking image of the characters we know. It is a spectacle devoid of substance. Final Fantasy VII is art, and Advent Children is a brand. And I feared such a fate for the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, that it would be little more than a member-berry reference machine wearing the skin of a thing I once loved, but devoid of all the things that made it worth loving. Thankfully, for the most part, the development team dived deeply into the textual nuance of those erstwhile heroes and produced not only high-fidelity models, but high-fidelity manifestations of these beloved characters. The Final Fantasy VII cast, at least the 5 would appear in this game, for the first time since their debut in the original Final Fantasy VII, feel unmistakably like the Final Fantasy VII cast. As I have just informed you, each of the Final Fantasy VII main party members is putting on a front, bearing their authentic selves and their authentic emotions behind layers of protective veneer. Cloud, Barret, Tifa, and Aeris, being both the most important and the most interesting of our 9 walkers, have enough energy and personality between them that they can hold up the entire game with their interactions alone. Such is the delicious robustness of their characterizations that they can even hold up a story in which none of them complete their character arcs. And since the truth of their personalities is not revealed within what parts of the story are covered by Remake, we instead get these delicious hints. I love the little moment when Barret is like,
You had me worried for a minute.
it's a sneak peek into that deeply emotional and philosophical man lying behind the performative rage. I can thus even appreciate his sunglasses. Barrett's sunglasses are central to his costume, and he allows himself to be more vulnerable and more authentic to his own emotions whenever he isn't wearing them. I like it when Barret says,
Give me something to hang on to!
as an expression of extreme emotional vulnerability during what is assuredly the second worst day of his life. Indeed, it isn't until the emotional nature of this particular story segment is resolved that Barret once again dons his shades and thus dons his veneer. Tifa and Aeris also give little hints towards their hidden depression and loneliness, respectively. I like this little exchange in Seventh Heaven when Tifa says,
So, you want another drink?
as an obvious move to deflect attention away from her reticence towards Avalanche's activities. I doubly love this exchange,
It was us. We did this.
followed by her decision to repress her own emotionality and allow Barrett's logic to again win. The Tifa-Barrett relationship is ripe for expansion within this story, and I hope they devote the necessary resources to it. I hope we get more confrontations between these two in the future. Aeris, meanwhile, communicated in the softest changes in her voice and the slightest invocations of certain facial expressions, channels her loneliness and desperation for connection into quirky fun approachability. I also appreciate how this inner loneliness is expressed in the train graveyard scene, an otherwise filler episode which instead capitalizes upon the opportunity to deepen our understanding of our dear friend Aeris. I also really appreciate how instantly friendly Aeris and Tifa are, in stark contrast to the initial hostility of Cloud and Barret. Clarith, Cloti, Bro, Aerfa, Tifrith? I don't know. Aerfa kind of sounds like an in-universe, like low-quality brand of energy drink, and Tifrith sounds like Ifrit's lame cousin, who like became an accountant or something. Therefore, with the evidence presented, I can hereby declare that, to my relief, the crafters of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy have proven to me that they understand the delicious nuances of Final Fantasy VII's principal cast, which transcends the visual appeal of their high-fidelity models. These people feel more like people than props, and I'm excited to hang out with these people more in the coming years. And there's a lot that I'll put up with to hang out with them. This was, to my mind, the most important thing to get right about the Remake Trilogy project, and so far they've nailed it. Great job. And I could talk about these characters all day, and I'm talking about all day. But for the auspices of this video project, let's talk a little bit more about the characters within the context of number 5. The combat. Perhaps chiefest among Final Fantasy VII Remake's challenges was perfecting a foundation upon which the trilogy's combat mechanics could be constructed. I will admit that I feared hardcore when I first heard that this game was going to contain a hybrid ATB action combat system, as I found any such attempts at a system that I've wielded in previous JRPGs to be pretty bad and rather unwieldy. These fears were compounded when in 2018, rumors abounded that all the work done by CyberConnect 2, which was mostly in the gameplay department, was to be scrapped, and that Squeenix would be essentially having to start this process all over again. I also feared that the combat and the characterization would be too far removed from each other, as the materia system as a means of expressing characterization is chief among my reasons for appreciating that system. And thus here, in the power of hindsight, I'm happy to report that Final Fantasy VII Remake, for the most part, hit the ball right out of the park. My precious materia system, though a bit clunkier and more stiff than I would have liked, has made the transition relatively unscathed, and I'm happy again to express my interpretation of the characters vis-a-vis their materia loadouts. I have also internally wished that the party members in the original Final Fantasy VII could have been a little bit more distinct from one another, and maybe had abilities beyond just their limit breaks, which are unique to them. I have, in the past, facsimiled such a wish with material loadouts in the OG, but am, of course, limited in this application. Then, lo and behold, Final Fantasy VII Remake does this for me, giving each of its 4 playable characters a deliciously distinct fighting style and set of abilities, which one then augments with materia to imbue each of them with their own unique playstyle. Experimenting with these playstyles amid a variety of handcrafted combat sequences is so much fun that I even enjoy it in a contextless, empty space. And I even enjoy it even though I have to interact with this little kid who, without wishing offense to him or any of the people who designed him, is the most punchable kid I have ever seen in any reality. I want to beat this kid up. I want to hit this kid in the face. I want to see tears welling in his eyes as he looks up to me, betrayed, thinking I was his friend. I don't know, look at his socks. I want to bully this kid. Anyway, let's talk about the characters' gameplay in the order that I like playing them from worst to best. Number 4, Aeris. Alas, that Aeris, for all her strength of character, drew the clunkiest of the clunky gameplay straws. Her magic and ATB wards are fabulous in concept, though the auspices of hard mode, aka real mode, disincentivize using magic. And characters such as Barret and especially Tifa are such ATB generating machines that they can easily do without these. Plus the ward's spatial limitations add yet another layer of use complexity. And the robust mobility of literally every enemy in the game often necessitates one moving one's character beyond the power borders of Aeris' floor-bound assistance wards. Her fleeting familiar is precious, but I never really saw much use for it outside of aesthetics. Her shield ability is fantastic on paper, but paper is a fragile material too easily soddened by the elements, and thus I found her shield ability finicky to use and especially to orientate, and in fights like Eligor the Arsenal, who live to utilize the exact kinds of ranged abilities this shield can shield against, there are also environmental options for cover, which are sturdier and easier to position yourselves within, and generally speaking, constant, thus de-necessitating the use of the shield. Her most powerful ability is probably Sorceress Storm, as it's a fantastic get away from me AoE if melee foes are closing in. Plus the ability to absorb MP is useful, as Aeris is your strongest caster, and her unique abilities are generally worthless enough that you'll mostly be using her to cast spells anyway. And while I want to like Ray of Judgment, I really do, it's a fantastic finisher, and is like the only non-Tifa means of punching up that stagger percentage. It takes like 2 ATB bars to cast on a character in our party with whom it is the most difficult to generate an ATB gauge. Plus, this little 2-second warm-up gives us 2 seconds for your other party members to bury the intended target. So Ray of Judgment almost always fails to hit for its full effect. And like people can just move out of the way of it and it won't readjust. And that's lame. I want to fire my laser. Fortunately, focusing on some more positives, both of Aeris' limit breaks are extremely useful, especially if you slap a Gotterdamerung on her. Drip-feeding one's party scrumptious heals or periodic physical damage immunity can be a godsend, especially on hard mode, which is the real mode. However, the last point knocking Aeris is that we spend most of the game bereft of her presence, and therefore most of the encounters are designed around Cloud, Tifa, and Barret, leaving Aeris with a toolset seemingly intended to counter foes who are not encountered in this stretch of the game. And the devs seem to agree with me, as she's gotten a bit of a redesign and rebirth, so here's hoping that she's better in that game. If not, I guess they can always try to get her right in Part 3. I still adore her as a character, though. Like, show me a person who doesn't love that high five sequence. In fact, so strong is Aeris as a personality that she personally can hold up what would otherwise be the sloggiest of sloggest points in the whole game. But alas, she's in need of a bit of a gameplay boost. Though, fortunately for her, in Rebirth, she's going to have to go up against Cait Sith, who is the most bench-warming of the party members that I bench-warm. So, you know, all you have to do is not be as bad as Cait Sith, and you'll be fine, Aeris. Number 3, Cloud. Cloud, our party's perennial all-rounder, is well suited for pretty much every combat task, save flying enemies. And seeing as he's going to be in your party for 95% of the game, it's best to equip him with an adaptable moveset. Thus, all of Cloud's moves are decent, though I would call none save Triple Slash exceptional. And Triple Slash is exceptional. It can end fights all by itself. Otherwise, it's usually rinse, wash, and repeat with our spiky friend. Open with Triple Slash, pound whap with Operator Mode, Focus Strike when pressured, then switch to Punisher when staggered, and finish off with a flashy Braver. Counter stance is situationally useful, especially against human enemies, though it requires an exact timing, whereas the counter stance inherent to Punisher mode is endless. So you might as well just use that. The skill you get from the nail bat that switches your stance is pretty much worthless. That I don't even remember what it's called, and I never use it because like a button to switch the stance, I already have it, and I don't have to commit it. I don't have to commit this dumb move to my limited 4 shortcut moveset. And Infinity's End is a nice stagger, except you need 2 ATBs, and its flashy intro usually means the stagger meter or the enemy itself expire before you can pull it off. Otherwise, My Cloud comes equipped with the human enemy bane of Fire All, or I guess Fire Magnify, to use modern parlance. Such is a respectable AoE for a respectable magic caster. And it's especially useful against the legions of human lives one must end with Cloud, especially in the sections where Cloud fights alone. And it cripples those dang dogs. Any Souls veterans in the audience know you always take out the dogs first. So yeah, Cloud's pretty solid, but what kind of guy would want to beat Cloud when they could be number 2? Barret. If there's one character who utterly steals the show in Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's my boy Barret. And our big friend Barret is an absolute beast. The rhythm of his bursts of bullet fire, complete with the little gaps you can use to quickly charge up that special overcharge attack, which does a great deal of long-range damage and is an ATB gauge filler, is just like so much fun. Plus, all of his character-centric skills are useful. Steel Skin and Lifesaver bulk our buddy up and make his naturally endowed vitality and robust HP pool even better. Focused Shot can be used with 1 or 2 ATB bars, thus making it superior among these stagger gauge fillers in terms of versatility. And popping off a 2 ATB focus shot with Barret is actually pretty easy, because this boy is built to generate ATB gauge. But still, even if not fully charged, he can still punch up that stagger gauge. He also gets these 2 kind of fun melee attacks to his kit, helping you out if things are getting close and personal. A move I like to call Slam Dunk is a nice get away from me AoE, and his cute little uppercut move can bite a good chunk of enemy health out, and it charges up his overcharge ability, making it usually possible for you to have a nice little overcharge follow-up. Then there's Maximum Fury, a perfect little crowd-controlling lockdown move. Like Focused Shot, Maximum Fury is usable with either 1 or 2 ATB gauges, with the second variant being about twice as long as the first. It can interrupt enemy attacks, it can lock down enemies what are moving quickly, and is ultra satisfying to use against staggered enemies. Plus, what with Barret's role as Team Dad, and with him being an ultra softy beneath his terse veneer, I also equip him with Bolstering White Magic materia. And with his being our party's resident preacher, I like to give him the Prayer ability, an absolutely essential materia on hard mode, aka real mode. And with Barret's ability to fill up his ATB gauge like he's working overtime at the ATB gauge fill-in factory, he can pop it off with distinguishable reliability. All in all, this is an excellent bud to have in our arsenal, which makes him almost as good as number 1, Tifa. Bro, all you need is that uppercut to an animation truncating dive kick. You can also overpower to close distances. You can Star Shower for crowd control. You can Focus Strike to pressure boys. You can True Strike on staggered boys. And that powered up triple triangle combo can just cripple people. It's great. She's quick. She's got the fastest based movement and the fastest dodge. Her Focused Strike can actually function as a dodge because it pulls her away and slaps her back in. I personally like to slap the enemy skill materia on her so I can use Agid Aura, and Spirit Siphon to just flat out damage people for the crime of being close to me. Tifa is a powerhouse who is ridiculously fun to play. Like, I feel bad for Cloud in Chapter 3 because, like, Tifa joined the party, and I just want to play as her. Have fun in the background, buddy. She's able to lock down and stun like enemies with, like, extreme precision. She's fast enough to dance around the little humanoid enemies. She generates so much ATB that you'll be able to pop off one of her abilities about every 2 seconds. And she's got the best triangle attack. Plus, you can buff up that triangle attack to be one of 2 different kinds of triangle attacks, and then you can chain them. That's awesome. Oh, and did I mention that uppercut to an animation truncating dive kick move? Honestly, that's probably one of the best attacks in the whole goddamn game. Look at how much damage it does. And Tifa starts with both abilities. And anything that can wipe out those annoying ghosts in either of their terrible boss fights is a godsend in my book. And look how quickly she can wipe out Genova's tentacles. Honestly, the only kind of downside to Tifa's moveset and playstyle is that she's functionally useless against flying enemies. And the move Chi Trap is worthless. And even that first point can be mitigated by magic, but I don't like equipping Tifa with magic for two reasons. One is that I view the materia system as an opportunity to express characterization, and in both the original and the remake, I equipped Tifa to attack as hard and as often as she can. Because she's a martial artist. She didn't spend thousands of hours training to punch kick, just to cast Fyra every battle. Two is that I figured I should intentionally give her some kind of weakness, because she's so fun to play, and otherwise doesn't have any weaknesses.
So suck it up, because I'm not leaving.
Well, good. I need you to kick everybody's butt, girlfriend. So, Tifa wins as the best of the big four in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, making her so good, in fact, that she's almost as fun to play as the actual number one, Yuffie. The only thing I'm going to end up saying about the intergrade content is that it's worth putting up with for the sole purpose of getting to play as Yuffie. As filler episode as its story is, the promises it put forth in terms of gameplay are extremely promising. The battle system set forth in Remake is a really solid foundation, and I'm glad they're already innovating on it. Yuffie's main gimmick is being able to elemental shift with elemental ninjutsu to exploit enemy weaknesses and charge her banishment ability, which is wonderfully fun. Art of War is a great stun lock for a single enemy. Windstorm is your get away from me AoE crowd control. Brumal Form is a dodge that I can't ever figure out how to use, but I'm sure it's great once you kind of get the hang of it. And Cactar Caper is as silly as it is mostly worthless. Plus, her triangle ability is loads of tactical fun, as one gets to actively experiment with its timing capabilities. Throwing, stun locking, retrieving, and then just to do it all again. You know, like, she's so much fun to play. In fact, she's fun enough to play that I mostly forget about Sonon and their Nito tag team abilities and just focus on the main course, relegating poor Sonon to HP recovery duty. Sorry, buddy. But who knows, stick around and maybe they'll give you something fun to do in Rebirth. Speaking of Rebirth, which might ruin the whole series for me, it's still going to be fun AF to play. And hey, no matter what happens, we're at least going to get a killer soundtrack. Speaking of, number 6. The music. The music in this game is so wonderful that I don't even care that it's a MIDI. While live recordings with real instruments are always going to bring textual nuances that MIDI instruments can't replicate, the compositional aspects are powerful enough that I don't care. Indeed, the main strength of living legend Nobuo Uematsu was his compositional strength, in that his skills in melody, structure, and instrumentation could make even the dullest of computer-generated instruments sing. Alas, that Uematsu's main contribution to Remake's soundtrack, outside of his untouchable legacy, is the song Hollow, and its stripped-down instrumental version, Hollow Skies. And I really, really like Hollow Skies, with its complex simplicity. Its dueling, pulsating guitar harmonies reflect the quiet battle which is slowly building in Cloud's psyche. And there's a sad determination to its melody that I feel really fits the game's tone. And I like Hollow just fine, even if I think it's a little tryhardy. However, the real star of Remake's music scene is Masashi Hamauzu, who not only cranked out hot, faithful renditions of OG's classic tracks, but also spun their thematic material into new compositions. We've also got to shout out Tadayoshi Makino and Mitsuto Suzuki for their contributions. I thoroughly enjoy the project for having multiple composers working on it. Every composer has their own distinct style, and the proper application of these styles can really make the world pop. The robust 156 tracks provided in the official OST release doesn't have a weak track among them. But allow me a little time to point out bangers like the Mako Reactor fight theme.
Gonna throw your sword at him? Let the man with the gun go to work. These 10 cans ain't got nothing on me. Now for the real stuff. Suck on this. How'd you like that? Rah! Hope you don't mind if I fill you full of holes. Give him hell. Do your job.
The Operation Rescue Eris theme.
You're going down. All the way on.
Right there!
Deal with that.
Yeah, I'll see ya.
Thanks. What's going on?
Bring it on.
The idea was to not get noticed.
Stealthy.
And the Genova boss fight theme.
One, get fired up!
It's on you.
All set! Don't think you'll walk away from this! Watch your tongue! I'm coming in! Don't let him stop us! Come on!
All look to the original as inspiration to launch into new, textually appropriate ideas, encapsulating the very conceit of the remake project, which the story mostly, also pulls off. Plus, there's so many bangers that aren't even on the soundtrack, like the little song that plays when you're approaching the pillar in the graveyard, or the Shinra music theme. And hey, whoever's idea it was to have diegetic themes that you can play on these jukeboxes, like, give that guy a raise. That guy's a genius. And I can't stop listening to the Stamp song. It's so good. And it's all good stuff, man. Like the way they layered music to have parts weave in and out, all depending on where you are or what you're doing or whether you're in battle or not. Like, it's phenomenal and immersive and a bunch of other positive adjectives. Honestly, I feel really guilty having turned the music off to capture footage to make this video. Playing the game without music makes it feel empty? I mean, don't get me wrong, the sound effects guys are, like in everything, the true unsung heroes of this production's audio, but it's a testament to the load-bearing nature of the music that I could so profoundly feel its absence. Plus, they released the soundtrack on Spotify around my birthday. Aw, thanks for the present, Square Enix. It's the little things in life, you know? Speaking of, number 7. The little things. I wanted to dedicate this last section and the positive part of this video review to the little things. Small and perhaps even mostly unnotable instances which demonstrate that despite the time that I'm going to spend fan whinging about this game, I really do appreciate its existence, and I can tell that it was a passion project. And so I wanted to shout out little moments that I noticed and value and keep close to my heart. These are the things that make the game worth playing, honestly. I love the first 2 chapters. I love when Cloud gets sealed in the room with the guards, and the guards are all like,
It's over!
and Cloud's all like,
That's my line.
that's such a dorky thing to say. I love it. I love Barrett. Oh, he steals every scene he's in. One of the most interesting parts about playing the remake is how in the original, I played the original when I was a little baby boy. And being a little baby boy, I identified mostly with Cloud. But now that I'm like a grown-up who's got to pay rent every month, I identify the most with Barrett. Like, I like this guy. It's my man Barrett. And shout out to the voice actor. Bro, you crushed it. Keep crushing it. I love you. No matter what happens in the rest of the remake trilogy, Barrett's gonna crush it, and I'm gonna love Barrett. Oh, I want to kiss him.
Okay, y'all watch and learn. I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna do it. Gonna show you how it's done.
I love when Jesse says,
There's such a thing as playing too hard to get.
I love every interaction between Barrett and Marlene. They're precious. I love that the mocap and animation quality have progressed to such a point that one can tell that Tifa is really dialing up the energy in Seventh Heaven in an attempt to wallpaper over her own doubts and reservation about all the things going on. Such is her nature that she feels deeply like expressing such doubts constitutes letting everybody down. In fact, I love all the little peeks under the hood we get of all the principal characters, each one of them projecting a kind of facade as that they're going to spend the next 2 games unraveling. It's nice to have the game's makers showcase their deep understanding of each character and the utter confidence they display in their characterization. I also love Tifa's little load-bearing,
Huh?
She admits after Cloud says it's been 5 years. We're going to have to spend 1.5 games unpacking that, huh? And while I'm going to have to say some very unkind things about the gameplay elements which take place in these zones, I do appreciate the time and effort that went into making the Sector 7, the Sector 5, and the Wall Market maps feel like real living places full of actual people. From thoughtful level design to ambient dialogue to the little human touches, I did feel connected to these places and really enjoyed walking around in them. And I think it's a testament to good level design that I turned my minimap off and don't recall ever getting lost, even when I first played the game. It makes me real excited to see all the places that we're going to visit in part 2. For the most part, I enjoy the little buddy brigade excursion we have with Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. I laugh out loud at this exchange every time.
Why you have to be such a hard ass, bro?
I ain't your bro.
I also appreciate when Wedge says,
It's all a game to her. Don't fall for it.
it makes Jesse a little bit less irritating, but only a little bit. I like that Tifa takes charge of protecting people on the train to Sector 5. In fact, I appreciate the efforts to make Tifa a more active participant in this story, a more dynamic character in general. I hope we get more development in her relationship with Barrett, and in particular, if she's going to develop the guts to push back a little bit against his rhetoric. Speaking of Barrett, my favorite boy, I also enjoy his preaching throughout the Sector 5 mission. I also really like it when he invites Cloud to partake in his excitement, and Cloud is all like,
Veto.
I love this man.
Put me on TV, I'm gonna drop some truth.
You know who else I love? I really love Eris. The playful side of her personality was present in the original, but this one really leans into it. I love her wordplay and how much she picks on Cloud. I like when Cloud's all like,
Training grounds, barracks, battlefields. That's the world I know.
and then Eris is all like,
Stations there.
I can see that.
Oh? Thought the world you knew didn't include stations.
Ha ha.
and then we have this little exchange.
So, Cloud, what's your favorite flower?
They're all the same to me.
Huh. You sure you want to say that to a florist?
Better than lying.
Okay. Then what'd you do with the flower I gave you?
You
give it away?
I did.
Ooh, to who? Tell me.
Don't recall. What?
Thought you didn't like lying.
And then again, after defeating Rude, which, hey, I actually really enjoy this this little Rude boss fight. But afterwards, we get treated to this precious exchange.
Please, just leave us alone.
You know I can't do that.
Followed almost immediately by,
Go home and stay there.
You know I can't do that.
Eris is great. I love her so much. She's well characterized and interesting enough that her personality alone can hold up what turns out to be the worst parts of the game. I really like what they did with Wall Market, even though I think we linger there too long. I also really enjoy Andrea, as he's the only member of the trio who isn't extremely irritating. I also really like his gaudy cabaret dance routine with Cloud, which, by the way, is extremely weird to play if you turn the music off for the sake of video capture. I love it when Cloud goes,
Nailed it. I know. Thank you. Moving on.
which was an invention of the English translators. Good job, guys. Corneo's also a lot of fun in a deeply uncomfortable sex crime kind of way. I'm really looking forward to murdering him and Wutai in the third game. I really appreciate that they spun the train graveyard chapter into being about Eris's loneliness, thus again showcasing how much of her mere presence improves all of these filler sequences. I'm a big fan of the Pillar Turks boss fight. It's so much fun. Look at that camera angle. I like it when Reno says,
It's nothing personal, bitch.
and
You don't. Not when I'm working.
I also have to highlight again this little exchange between Barrett and Tifa.
It was us. We did this.
No, you can't think like that.
And I, again, must voice my desire to see more such scenes between these two. I also can appreciate that even in the depths of his despair, Barrett still goes out of his way to try to make Tifa feel better. I mean, I don't think he was very successful. And I do chuckle a little bit about how giant his hand is compared to hers. But I think it still says a lot about him that he's still trying to be the group's cheerleader, even now during the second worst day of his life. And piggybacking off of that, I really like when Barrett exclaims,
Tell me she is. Give me something to hang on to.
I'm always a fan of extreme emotional honesty, especially from characters who are almost always concerning themselves with the emotional states of others. I appreciate the subtlety that Barrett has now accepted Cloud into his life to the extent that he is flat out willing to ask him for emotional support. Such is the deepest form of platonic male intimacy. I also enjoy playing as Barrett enough that I even find myself looking forward to his little nonsense filler shooting gallery section. And again, I must say that every interaction between Barrett and Marlene is precious. And as this might be the final one, for a long time, we must enjoy it. I'm really hoping that that Marlene and Elmira move to calm. in Rebirth, and we can go visit and hang out and have a little chill time with them, you know? And I like that. I like that we get a little bit more Elmira. She's got a little bit more of a personality, you know? And before we leave Elmira's house forever, let's talk about the most precious of the Chapter 14 date resolutions. It's Tifa's. I appreciate this one most of all because it's nice to see a character who has just undergone something super emotionally taxing break a little bit. It's a nice little bonding moment, you know?
They took everything from us. Again.
And I remember when I first got this and, like, she's crying into Cloud's chest and I was just screaming at the television in my chiefest of Garland, Texas, Hank Hill voices. Boy, if you don't hug that girl, I'm gonna come into the television, I'm gonna kick your ass. It's nice. It's a cute, precious little moment between these two. I love it. Chapter 14 is unequivocally among the worst parts of the game, especially because it's got Leslie in it. But I like it when Barrett's all like,
I don't trust you and I don't like you. So if you so much as breathe in a suspicious way, I'll turn that face of yours into a honeycomb.
At this point in the story, Cloud and Barrett have buddied into full-time buds, thus depriving us of the necessary circumstances for Barrett to inhabit his tough guy persona. Seeing him act towards Leslie the way he acted towards Cloud in the beginning of the story is cute. Plus, Leslie sucks. I really like it when Don Corneo effortlessly defeats him, and I desperately hope I get to see him die before this story is over. But probably not. Chapter 15 is also a highlight as a combat arena, and it's probably the strongest instance of fighting mechanics in the whole game. The Cloud Barrett Tifa party is extremely balanced and fun to play, especially in an endurance test sense. I suspect the team was starting to hit their stride in regards to Chapter 15 and 16, which both just knock it out of the park. I also love the little corporate propaganda museum and the Neo Midgar cutscene. Both really give us a sense of where the Shinra company came from and where it's hoping to go. I love that Mayor Domino has been elevated to an Avalanche informant, and I also love his little Mayor is the Best quest. It's good fun. None of these things were present in the original, and yet they work. And where were the plot ghosts to prevent these changes? Aren't they supposed to keep Destiny on its course? Also, if the point of the plot ghost is to keep everything like it was in the original, why aren't they trying to demolish this museum? Because it wasn't in the original. Oh, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to that later. I love how revoltingly, irredeemably evil Hojo is. And oh, he's so gross. I can't wait to kick his butt. I like our time in the drum, as it's both my favorite video game dungeon section in terms of design, atmosphere, and combat encounters. And it's always fun to have a multi-party dungeon, something that party-based RPGs are honestly starving for. It also serves as a nice little hangout time with Red 13, so that we can luxuriate in his pre-character development personality. I like all the little scenes with Red 13, except when he's being forced to be the exposition boy for the Arbiters of Fate, whose presence nearly ruined the entire game, but we'll get to it. In the meantime, let's instead luxuriate in the best line in the whole game.
I mean, ain't you a Shinra lab rat or dog?
I'm not a rat dog.
And the second best line in the whole game.
What is this ragtag group of misfits I see before me? Avalanche!
Local florist.
Lab rat dog.
I just really love that lab rat dog line. The Rufus boss fight is buckets of fun, and Rufus himself is an absolute joy, and I hope we get to see more of him in Rebirth. The Arsenal fight is pretty fun too. I also like when Cloud motorcycles everyone to death, because it's like so cheesy. And then I like when Barrett's like,
man, you need to lighten up. Hell, you might even try smiling. On second thought, maybe frowning suits you better.
And then I like, what else do I like from this point? You know, I like the fact that you can chapter select in New Game Plus, so when I replay the game, I can skip the parts I don't care for. And that's it. That's all I like. Which is great, because now that means we can get to... Well, now that we're done gushing like a mid-2000s Gushers commercial, let's move on to the stuff I don't like. Number 1, that door texture. Now, this probably seems like a pretty petty thing to write an entire numbered section over, but hear me out. It's not what the door texture is, but what the door texture means. Idiosyncratic to Final Fantasy VII Remake is its palpable contrast between high-effort content and low-effort content. Brazenly embroidered upon the heraldic banner of this exact point is the infamous door texture, as the door texture was the first obvious sign of low-effort content after the slam dunk that was chapters 1 and 2. But it certainly wouldn't be the last. Indeed, the door texture burned its place onto the gray fabric of our brains because it displayed that for all of its glory, Final Fantasy VII Remake was never going to be an unalloyed triumph. In fact, you could say that the door texture stopped us dead in our fanboyish reverie after the superb first 2 hours-ish of the game to remind us of the cold, hard truth that nothing can ever be perfect. That the Final Fantasy VII Remake of our hearts could never fully be realized, and frankly, the Final Fantasy VII Remake we got was probably as good as it was going to get. For all of its great strides, powerful and tactful adaptations of classical moments, and supreme attention to detail, Final Fantasy VII Remake was always going to contain parts that we were just going to have to put up with, like the door texture, or like how this dartboard isn't perfectly round, or that there's too much Sephiroth, or that, like, you run into the same model of person in the same town like 15 times in a row. How many sets of twins and triplets are there? Or that there's too much Sephiroth, or that despite the glories of chapters 1, 2, 7, 12, 13, and 15, and 16, there are always going to be chapters 3, 6, 8, 14, and 18. Or that there's too much Sephiroth, or for example, the oversaturation of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. Or that big problem that we're going to have to talk about later. Or that there's too much Sephiroth. All this points to the uncomfortable fact that even the Final Fantasy VII Remake is bound by the limitations of time and resources and trends. Our beloved was always going to be blemished. Number 2, there's too much Sephiroth. Those of you who watched either of my feature-length gushing love letters to the original Final Fantasy VII or its shorter counterpart will understand this point before I even have to explain it. But I'll explain it anyway. When it comes to Big Daddy Sephiroth, less is more. Much of Sephiroth's appeal lies in his mystique, and that we spend more time basking in the ramifications of his actions rather than directly witnessing them. Every time Sephiroth appears in the story to deliver weird, ham-fisted dialogue, another aspect of the enigma is chipped away. Thus, the original Final Fantasy VII, more art than product, knew that Sephiroth must be employed with only the utmost restraint, and it works. Now, Final Fantasy VII is a brand unto itself, and brands have fans, and fans bring about the deaths of brands by loving them too much. For such love attracts the money men like blood in the water, and the only thing the money men know how to do is exploit something beautiful, suck it dry of everything that made it special, then discard its hollowed husk upon the corpse pile, so that they might pursue their next victim. What I'm trying to say is our little friend Final Fantasy VII is now a global name, and that such size invariably attracts brand recognition, and that the only words brands understand is more, for brands and the money men who craft them can only ever believe that more equals grander, and that bigger equals better. And so, Final Fantasy VII Remake is saturated in random appearances of Sephiroth, materializing as he does from the aether of memory to inform Cloud for the 834th time that villainy is afoot. And while I appreciate a few of these appearances, and I like how unsettling Sephiroth is, such consistency of appearances diluted the effect that this scene, which denotes the first physical appearance of a being resembling Sephiroth, so severely that it made me feel nothing. Sorry, friends, you filled me up on too much bread and butter, and now I'm not hungry for the main course. Number 3, certain character expansion.
Bingo!
Final Fantasy VII Remake's nature as an expansive adaptation means that story beats, which in the original game were conveyed in about 20 to 30-ish minutes, are now going to take hours to complete. As such, hyper-minor characters such as Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, characterized in the original as some guy who's a bit excitable, and some girl who likes technology and maybe has a little baby crush on Cloud, received just enough characterization to feel a little bit like people before they fulfilled their plot function of dying horrifically in the plate collapse 3 to 4-ish hours into the game. However, now that plate doesn't collapse until 15 or 20-ish hours into the game, which means that we're going to have to spend even more time with these lovable side characters, and perhaps their original characterizations do not have the necessary support structures to endure this increased screen time. Therefore, Biggs got expanded from being some guy to being some orphan who also worries sometimes. Wedge got expanded from some guy who's a bit excitable to a guy who's fat.
I'm running on empty here.
You can refuel at the base.
Next time I'll have to bring a little pick-me-up. Ugh, and I'm running on fumes. Maybe just a couple slices, Mrs. R.
Wedge! You think Wedge is holding up okay?
Of course he is. He's a lot tougher than people think. Probably sleeping soundly, dreaming about his cats.
You're right. We should treat him to a nice meal when he gets back. His choice.
I'm feeling much better thanks to Elmira's cooking.
And Jessie got expanded from some girl who likes technology and maybe has a little bit of a baby crush on Cloud to some girl who can't stop sexually harassing Cloud and dry humping him on a motorcycle. Thus, after a while, these characters begin to grate, and such grating dilutes the impact of their impending deaths. Plus, their death scenes are too long.
Could have used some extra padding myself. Giving me that comfort. In the Sector 5 slums. The kids, they're great. I used to visit. Our future is in your hands. Biggs! You made it. No, I might not.
Don't talk.
It's pretty bad up there. Cloud, promise me, don't let it be for nothing.
I won't.
You're a good man. Giving me that comfort.
This isn't over.
Number 4. Sidequesting Chapters.
This sucks.
The main event of chapters 3, 8, and 14 are side quests. The nicest thing that you can say about these side quests is that they're terribly uninteresting. The cruelest thing you can say about these side quests is that they're horrible wastes of time which kill the story's pacing. Even under the auspices of character hangout motivation, these asinine activities are a waste of time. For chapters 3 and 8 don't actually deepen the characterization of Tifa nor Aerith respectively, and chapter 14 doesn't even attempt to deliver any characters that matter. Look, I don't care about Leslie or his leather jacket, and a sappy backstory about how his girlfriend probably got eaten by a sewer goblin isn't gonna change that. It also doesn't help that his little story section is a blatant copy-paste of an earlier segment, complete with a copy-paste of that earlier segment's boss fight. A good side quest either expands upon an established character or provides the player with additional information about the world itself. Final Fantasy VII Remake's side quests are all busy work endeavors, consisting of either go kill a thing or go find a thing. All they ever reveal about the world are things that we already know, mostly because they take place in places we've already been, or they give us opportunities to again sample traits we've already sampled. To be honest with you, I think these side quest zones only exist to pad out the runtime of the game and create some easy content, which required few, if any, additional resources. And trust me, we're going to talk a lot more about that loaded statement here in a little bit. Number 5. The Watertower Flashback. Alright, this one is admittedly a nitpick, but I disapprove of the change in context which surrounds the initiation of the Cloud Tifa Watertower flashback scene. The nuance in the original is that Tifa deeply suspects that Cloud has a case of the brain mumbles, and she's subtly trying to gauge the state of his memory. Such nuance is absent in the remake. You could say that Cloud remembering the promise and choosing to honor it on his own constitutes a good character moment. But it doesn't really work because in the original, Cloud is all done working for the Buddy Brigade and the invocation of the promise convinces him to stay. We get the Tifa nuance and we get Cloud making a choice. In the remake, it was Barrett's choice to not rehire Cloud. Thus, Cloud's potential promise reneging is not of his own making. This remake scene has all of the appearance of the original without any of the contextual nuance. It's a worse version of the same scene. It instills in me a fear that other, much more important scenes are also going to be nuance diluted. Where are the plot cop plot ghosts here to stop this one? Number 6. I hate the plot ghosts. Okay, this is going to sound a little bit hysterical and maybe even a little bit tinfoil hat Alex Jonesy, but stick with me. Does anyone else here feel like the plot ghosts were a last-minute addition wallpapered over an already pre-existing game? Look, it's no secret that the Final Fantasy VII Remake had a couple of behind-the-scenes problems. There was that article about how like 2 years of work had to be scrapped and redone. That's 2 years of work. I bring this up because if one is going to split the OG FF7's story into 3 parts, the obvious ending for part 1 is the Nibelheim flashback. I can't be the only one who thinks this. I mean the structural tension buildup of Avalanche versus Shinra that gets blasted away by the appearance of Sephiroth, thus necessitating a Nibelheim flashback level exposition set piece, is the Act 1 climax we need, which then transitions us into Act 2. Plus, you even have a great excuse to shove a gratuitous Sephiroth final boss battle in there, in an appropriate place, where Sephiroth appears. It just fits perfectly. And like, there was clearly some Nibelheim modeling going on. We got some buildings, exteriors, interiors, Cloud's mom, Tifa's dad, jailbait Tifa of yesteryear. Like, there's clear evidence that Nibelheim was the original endpoint for this story. Plus, it bookends quite nicely. Like, you begin with a Mako reactor incident and a Sephiroth-centric town inferno, and then you end with a Mako reactor incident and a Sephiroth-centric town inferno. And not even avant-garde Tetsuya Nomura can resist a nice bookend. Hello there, future editing Zach here to pop in and say that the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth demo came out, which includes about 66% of the aforementioned Nibelheim flashback, and in it we get to hear Cloud's mom's, spoiler alert, Cloud's deceased mom's final words, which are,
Run away. You have to leave. You have to live.
and these are the exact words that Sephiroth says to Cloud in their little hallucination confrontation in Sector 8 at the beginning of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Run, Cloud. Run away. You have to leave. You have to live.
Which I think constitutes solid evidence that this was the plan all along and that these scenes were supposed to bookend each other. I mean, maybe in the 4 years between Remake's release and Rebirth's release, somebody stumbled upon this serendipitously, but I highly doubt it. This seems like something that was planned from the beginning, and I think it's just further evidence that Remake was originally supposed to end with the Nibelheim flashback, and then due to constraints, the Nibelheim flashback was cut and kicked down the can into Rebirth. So yeah, I rest my case. There's my evidence. Bailiff, you don't submit evidence to the bailiff. Okay, I'm done.
Plus, in the original, the Midgar section is dripping with textual hints, which will only begin to make sense once one experiences the Nibelheim flashback. And even in a trilogy symmetry structure sense, it fits. Part 1 is Mako Reactor 1 to the Nibelheim flashback, a march towards Sephiroth. Part 2 is Calm to the Forgotten Capital, thus a second march towards Sephiroth. And then Part 3 would bookend with both treks to the Northern Crater, which then gets us 2 marches towards Sephiroth for the price of 1. It's perfect on paper. But alas, that paper is a flimsy material, too easily crumpled, rippled, or destroyed by water. I think something happened a little bit like this.
Uh-oh. It's 2018 and I just got off the phone with CyberConnect 2 and we're gonna have to throw out all their work.
But we announced Final Fantasy VII Remake 3 years ago, back in 2015, and I'm consulting my chart here, and losing that 2 years of CyberConnect 2 work is gonna set the release date back, like, by a lot. And the shareholders are gonna want returns on their investments, and the unsatisfiable public has been waiting for so long. What should we do, sir?
It's okay, son. Don't panic. What work have we done?
Well, we've got a solid base for the combat system. We've got some solid maps for Sector 7 and Sectors 5 and 6. And we've gotten some good work done on the Shinra building. Oh, and we've got some of the train tunnels made for the Reactor 5 mission, and we finished modeling Nibelheim.
Oh, God. How much work is it going to be to complete the Nibelheim flashback sequence?
Well, let's see. We'll need to concept, model, and craft traversable levels for Calm, Mount Nibel, and the world map between Midgar and Calm. We're gonna need to fill those things with NPCs who need to be modeled, rigged, and animated, then programmed with AI and voice acting that will need to be written and recorded, then programmed into the game. Oh, and we're also gonna need some monsters for the traversal section and for Mount Nibel, and those are gonna need to be designed, concept, modeled, rigged, animated, AI'd, and play-tested. Plus we're gonna have to make all those story set pieces for the Nibelheim flashback, and also,
Christ in a picnic basket, how long do you think that's gonna take?
Oh, jeez, I don't know, like 2 years?
2 years? We just lost 2 years of development to this whole Cyber Connect 2 shenaniganry. How long before the Midgar stuff you've been working on is done?
I don't know, maybe 2 years?
2 years? You're telling me this? 1, 2, 3. You're telling me that we're 4 years away from getting this game done?
Sir, I'm telling you we're at least 4 years away from getting this game done.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We can't push the release date back 2 years. The board will have my head for this. Okay, new plan. We're gonna axe the Nibelheim flashback.
Axe the Nibelheim flashback?
Yeah. You all just focus on polishing up that Midgar section. We'll release that as the full game.
But won't that be pretty short?
Oh, tarnation, you're right. Look, find something, anything, to slow that player down, alright? You fill that Sector 7 map in with nonsense, low-effort side quests. And then, you fill them Sectors 5 and 6 maps with 2 different sets of low-effort, nonsense side quests.
Do you think that'll be enough, sir?
Oh, I don't know. Why don't you copy-paste those train tunnels and make Chapter 5 longer, just to be on the safe side?
Sir?
Do it! Oh, and while you're copy and pasting, why don't you copy-paste that sewer level and make the player do that whole thing again?
We're even gonna make them fight apps again?
We're gonna make them fight apps again.
But sir, if we cut the Nibelheim flashback, how are we gonna have Sephiroth as the final boss? Is the final boss gonna be Motorball?
Good God in heaven, you're right. We can't be having the final boss be Motorball. We're gonna have to find a way to convolute Sephiroth into this thing.
Convolute Sephiroth into this thing?
You heard me.
We're gonna convolute Sephiroth onto the Midgar Highway? Even though we don't have the part of the story that explains who this guy is, or why Cloud's mad at him, or what he did that was so evil? Even though a newcomer to this story has no idea what's going on, we're just gonna have him show up on the Midgar Highway?
You heard me, that's right.
How are we gonna do that, sir?
Well, I don't know. You're the creative here. Think of something.
I can't think of anything.
Well, I know someone who can.
To wake me from the nightmare, who is it?
Sir, we're gonna have to cut the Nibelheim flashback so we can get this game out on time. And we're gonna need a new final boss. Can you convolute a means of getting Sephiroth on the Midgar Highway?
Convolute Sephiroth onto the Midgar Highway, you say? You can bet your robust Japanese businessman salary I can convolute Sephiroth onto that Midgar Highway. I'll call you back. Alright. Now let's see. Think, Tetsuya, think. Okay. No pressure. We're just gonna brainstorm. Yeah, let's just brainstorm. Big swords. Oh, they already got those. Belt buckles. No, there's more than enough of those. People in hoods. No. People in black hoods. Yes. And fate. Well, that's all I got. Let's go with that.
In other words, I deeply suspect that the Final Fantasy VII Remake, for all of its triumphs, was a game that ultimately ran out of something. Delaying the game until the proper climax of the Nibelheim incident could be completed was, for whatever reasons, and probably good reasons, off the table. So a new climax had to be generated and slapped onto this plot, and it had to be cheap, and it had to be quick. Enter the plot ghosts, the arbiters of fate, represented by a relatively simple and effortless copy and pastable model that can be shoved into any scene that you want it to be shoved into.
What is all this?
You can shove it into the scene where Cloud and Aeris meet. You can convolute a means to delay the Sector 5 mission just so they can show up and get it back on track. You can plaster them all over the Sector 5 church for some reason. You can utterly ruin the otherwise fantastic Sector 7 pillar scene. Like, seriously, the train graveyard does such a good job of building tension for this set piece, and then these losers show up with their awfully dull boss fight, which is just copy and pasted from Chapter 4 with, like, literally no alterations. And it just kills the pace so hard. Like, we're trying to have touching death scenes with some characters, and these ghosts, they're in the way. And they also only ever show up to solve incredibly simple problems that were only shoehorned into the story as an excuse to give them something to show up and fix. Like, they're here keeping Eris from leaving Sector 8 too soon, but, you know, you're the story writer, so you can just not have her leave yet. Show up to give Jesse an owie so that Barrett can hire Cloud for the Sector 7 job, but, like, you're the ones who introduced the plot element of him not hiring Cloud again for the Sector 5 job. Just skip that part and have him hire him again. It's fine. They show up at the Sector 5 church to, I guess, make us remember that they're around. And then they show up at the pillar to delay us, I guess. I guess we were making too good a time in crossing the graveyard to get here. But, like, just have us not be making good time and show up, you know, a little bit late. They show up to shoo us out of this underground lab in Sector 7. But, like, we finished this level already. Like, we beat the boss and we did the exploration and we did the whole level. We're about to leave anyway. Like, why didn't you guys show up much earlier if you don't want us down here? And, like, you know, they revive Barrett, but the only reason Barrett got fatality stabbed is because they decided to have that happen. You can just not have that happen. And also, like, nobody ever brings them up outside of like the bizarre clamped on scenes that involve them, save for like this train ride home from Mako 1 with this one kind of easily edit-outable like interaction. And in this little scene in Eris's old room where Red has to pick up the Legolas stick and exposit a bunch of crap.
This is no mere ranger.
Whispers.
He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn.
Perhaps best described as arbiters of fate.
And heir to the throne of Gondor.
They are drawn to those who attempt to alter destiny's course.
This forest is old.
And ensure they do not.
There is a fell voice on the air.
Look.
Goblins.
They're coming.
Orcs.
When Aerith reached out to me, I found this knowledge.
The red sun rises.
Yes, for it is the will of the planet.
Keep him blind to all else that moves. A diversion.
I'm not a rat dog.
They're taking the hobbits to Isengard!
And like, look, you can just so easily just edit them out.
Move! Getting real tired of your shit!
Deeper!
Where'd you... Getting real tired of your shit!
And like, so in a video I made about the original Final Fantasy VII, I praised it for its tightness of fantasy elements and the consistency of its themes. And the plot ghosts just like spill a whole bunch of nasty water all over that. Like they make meta sense because they're us, or at least like what the developers were afraid we were gonna be like. You know, they're the unpleasable Final Fantasy VII fan base, but they don't make diegetic sense. Like, they're manifesting from the planet, but like what part of the planet? The life stream? The life stream is a quasi-conscious collection of memories and experiences of all living things on the planet. But so I guess that also includes memories of like stuff that happened in other dimensions or in the future? Like, what's that about? It just doesn't work. And like fate and destiny were never themes in the original Final Fantasy VII. And defying fate as a theme doesn't appear in any other context in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, besides as lip service for opposing whatever these like things are and like being mad at them whenever they show up. Like, it's not expressed in any character. Like, we don't see any characters fighting what they think is their destiny and how that's a heroic act. You know, it's only in the context of these whispers. And, like, it's just so annoying. And like time travel and interdimensional travel or whatever, it's always just an enormous can of worms for any story to open, and it's like never worth it, you know. Like Chrono Trigger and Back to the Future are the only ones who pull it off, and it just opens up so many stupid questions, like why are the Arbiters of Fate intervening now to keep Destiny on its course and prevent the apocalypse? Like, why not just go back in time and prevent Sephiroth from being born, you know? Or you can prevent the Genevo Project from happening. Or you can prevent Shinra from even forming. Why are you coming back to this time now? Why are you showing up now? Why don't you show up a little earlier where you can end things before they begin? You know, it's just it's a mess. And, like, I could forgive all of it if their boss fight was good, but neither of their boss fights are good, and the end boss fight with them it's just awful. And like the space where you fight them, it looks like it was made in a weekend with like some spare Midgar assets that were lying around, and like the 3 like Advent Children reference bosses are just like the same model with a different color scheme. And then after all of that and the gratuitous Sephiroth boss fight, the ending cutscene is like 45 seconds of our heroes standing on an empty field in the rain, and that's it. That's all you get. And I just they're so inconsistent. Like, sometimes they intervene immediately, you know? And other times, we have the time to go on an entire evening and night Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse adventure that in and of itself, like, introduces so many different elements and changes from the original story, you know? Like Jesse having an entire backstory that she didn't have before, or recontextualizing the Watertower Flashback, or having Avalanche be a broader organization that Barrett and his buds are like a rogue branch of, instead of just them being Avalanche. Or, you know, Wutai being presented as a much more active figure politically in this story, instead of just like a little side quest hub. And like, look, I like a lot of these changes. I think a lot of them are really interesting changes. I like Avalanche being a broader organization. I like Wutai being brought up more and being more important to the story, especially because we're going to flesh out Yuffie. I like that Shinra is warmongering another war, and I'm interested to see how that interacts with some of the other plot problems that we know are going to show up. Like, that's cool, interesting stuff, and I'm interested in seeing where they go with it. And I don't need ghosts to show up and convince me that it's okay for things to go in this direction. You know, like, I love this little exchange between Cloud and Barrett before the Shinra building.
Somehow, I don't think it's all for us. Could be for Avalanche. Or maybe even Wutai.
Can't be for Wutai. What about the ceasefire?
That only put the war on pause.
Like, just a simple exchange of 2 lines of dialogue changes so much in a fascinating way. Like, I'm looking forward to it. There's room for expansion and reinterpretation here, and I'm open to it. The original Final Fantasy VII is not perfect, and there are places where I'd like to see them flesh it out a bit more, you know? Like, I'd also love to see what they're going to do with some more of these characters. Like, Vincent and Yuffie were optional in the original. Now they're not going to be optional, and they get to have, you know, a bigger impact on the story. I want to see where they go with that. Red 13 kind of falls off of the plot right after Cosmo Canyon. I'm hoping they find some cool things for him to do and keep him active. You know, he's a good boy. I want to see more of him. You know, like, it looks like Sid's, from the trailers for the new game, it looks like Sid's going to become our friend a little bit earlier. And I like how all the trailers emphasize him interacting with Aeris and building a connection there, because they don't really interact much in the original game. That's interesting. But like, were the plot ghosts really the best way to go about facilitating that instead of just doing it, instead of just having it be a bit different? Like, why not just it's an adaptation after all. Like, all adaptations have changes, and I can't think of a single other one that feels like they need to have an in-universe explanation for why there's some changes. Like, imagine if you were watching The Lord of the Rings, and every time it deviated from the exact book plot, like, ghosts showed up, and Gandalf was like,
Frodo, we have to kill the ghosts so that we can defy destiny.
Like, it's weird. It doesn't belong. And so, like, the plot ghosts were either a last-minute insert climax here or an expression of an extreme lack of confidence on the part of the developers, and I don't know which is worse. The defeat of the Arbiters either heralds massive story changes, which, you can just do that. You don't need them there to justify it. And, Final Fantasy VII has some big moments that it's very clear they're not going to want to change because, they're iconic and they make the story work. But if they don't change anything, then what was even the point of having the plot ghost show up, and why make such a big deal about killing them at the end of the game? And being like, you're free from destiny, but everything's just going to kind of turn out the same way anyway. And I just, can somebody mod them out? Can someone mod out the Arbiters and give me a version of Final Fantasy VII Remake that just doesn't have them in it? I don't care if the game just cuts hard to black, at the Midgar highway section. I don't care if it just ends there. Just get these guys out of here. Square Enix, if you're listening, listen. Square Enix, I will pay $20 USD for a DLC, and all this DLC needs to do is just remove the plot ghosts from the game. You heard me right. I will pay for a DLC that does nothing but remove content, because it'll make the game better. It'll be an improvement. Alas that I sit here today telling you that I have to give the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy
a strike.
The Arbiters of Fate are bad enough that I constitute them a catastrophic error. It'd be better if they just weren't there. And changes to I'm going to say it again. Changes to a source material, that's fine. That's okay. The first ever video I made on this channel was me gushing over the Ammon Hen sequence in the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, which is pretty distinctly different than how it goes down in the book, but for the better. It serves as a better climax. It's got better emotional highs, and it's got better payoffs to some setups that have been going along through the movie. Every character in the Fellowship gets their moment, which is something they don't really get in the book. It's just it's a much better sequence in the movies, and more than that, it's better because it's also true to the characters and true to the spirit and the themes of the original. That stuff is still there. They just did what the original did in a better way, which is great in an adaptation. It's what you want in an adaptation. And it's Square Enix's game and it's their story, and they can make any changes they want. That's fine. It's just you just before you change stuff, you have to make sure that the changes you make aren't fucking stupid, okay?
When Aerith reached out to me, I found this knowledge of the Whispers.
I think I'm getting old. 7. Story versus brand. Look, Final Fantasy VII is important to me. Family's never played it. My friends have never played it. It was mine. When I was young, it was my thing. That was just for me. It spoke to me. It feels like they made it just for me, and it feels like it's about me. And now this little game that was once just for me and is sort of about me, this story that has accompanied me all throughout the chapters of my life, highs and lows. It's getting big E3 press conferences, and it's got voice actor panels now, and it's got merchandising out the wazoo, and it's just got all these little things and spin-offs and toys and whatever. All these things that are making it into a brand in and of itself. And scroll down to the community section on the Steam page, and you're just instantly hit by people pornographizing this thing that I love. As if Tifa's boobs are more important than the contents of her character and her role in the story. It's not more important than what she stands for. It's just I know the stuff that I love about Final Fantasy VII isn't the stuff that you put in a trailer or show off at an E3 event or talk about in a business meeting where you're trying to get a room full of Japanese businessmen to invest millions of yen into this project, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that this thing I love is going to get Marvelized or Star Warsified, or just have all of its little quirks and idiosyncrasies and all this little stuff I love about it just focus tested and market researched and brand identity out of it until it's something I don't recognize anymore. It's just a husk wearing the skin of something I loved once. I guess I just have to wait to see what the future brings. This team, they've made some really good stuff, and they've also made quite a number of stinkers, so it could go either way. And if worse comes to worse, they can just remake it again, remake it forever. I'll buy it. I'm a sucker. You know, I'll get the PlayStation 15 or whatever and buy it and play it when I'm a 68-year-old man. I'll do it, but just please, like, let's avoid that. Let's just don't get no more strikes, okay? Just no more strikes, Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy, please. So, should I love the Final Fantasy VII Remake? I don't know. I guess it's too early to tell. Maybe the rest of this series will avoid all the troubles of the first one and flourish, and we'll just remember the plot ghosts as that kind of bad part. Or maybe I'm gonna have to break up with my favorite story. I guess we'll all just have to wait until the world premiere of the Idiots Monthly review event of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Will it restore my faith in the franchise, or will it break my heart irrevocably? Irrevocably? Whatever. I can't wait to find out, and neither can you. Goodbye!